I didn't insult them. I'm speaking the truth. You ask a question, you get an answer from me. Sorry that I'm being blunt. What the Did you see his performance on the Stone Cold podcast? Did it piss off Steve Austin? Did it piss you off too?
Paul Heyman is celebrated as a creative genius. He revolutionized professional wrestling. He launched legendary careers. He created moments that became unforgettable. He built something from nothing in a small arena in Philadelphia. He took wrestlers nobody else wanted and turned them into superstars. He created a brand that still influences wrestling to this day. Everyone in wrestling history has to give him credit for his creative vision. His impact on the industry is undeniable. But there is another side to this story. One that the biggest names in the entire industry have gone on record discussing. One that involves deep betrayal. One that involves constant lies. One that involves promises broken so badly that some of his most loyal soldiers fell into severe depression and crisis. One that destroyed lives and created lasting damage. One that created lasting trauma. These are words directly from the legends themselves. Tommy Dreamer has spoken openly about hitting rock bottom emotionally because of Heyman's betrayal. One of the most respected wrestlers of all time was broken so badly that he does not know how he survived. This is what the legends of professional wrestling want you to know. This is the story they have gone on record telling. Paul Heyman promised a revolution. His wrestlers believed him with all their hearts. They sacrificed everything, their bodies, their bank accounts, their mental health. They called him family. They called him a visionary. But in early 2001, everything changed. His wrestlers discovered that Heyman had already signed a secret deal with the WWE. He had already secured his own future, and he let them keep bleeding in the ring for a dying company while he was already gone. If you love wrestling history and the real untold stories that change the industry forever, please use the hype feature and give this video hype right now. Seriously, hit that hype button. Share it with other wrestling fans. This is the kind of story that absolutely needs to be told and heard by everyone. This is the kind of story that the wrestling community needs to know about. This video is dedicated to every wrestler who was betrayed, every wrestler who was broken, every wrestler who sacrificed everything for a revolution that was never real, every wrestler who suffered because of Paul Heyman's manipulation and exploitation. Their stories matter, their pain matters, their voices matter, and they deserve to be heard. Truth about Paul Heyman is that he was two different people living in one body. The first Paul Heyman was a visionary. He saw things in professional wrestling that nobody else could see. He understood the art form in ways that changed the industry forever. He understood psychology. He understood what made matches matter. He understood what made people care. He took a promotion with almost no money and made it legendary. He made wrestlers famous. He made moments that fans still talk about today. He was a creative genius. His creative mind was undeniable. He could book matches that meant something. He could build storylines that resonated. He could create characters that fans believed in. That Paul Heyman was a true visionary. But there was another Paul Heyman. This one was unethical as a businessman. He was willing to lie to people's faces. He made promises he never kept. He used emotional manipulation to trap people into working while unpaid. He created an environment where loyalty was demanded, respect was never returned. He weaponized the concept of family. He weaponized the revolution. He weaponized the very idealism that made his creative vision compelling. These two Paul Heymans existed in the same body, and the wrestlers working for him could never predict which version they would face on any given day. One day you would see the visionary who wanted to change wrestling. The next day you would see the con man who was taking everything you had. Number 10 is Taz. Taz was a main event wrestler in ECW. He was the Taz. He was the human suplex machine. He was incredibly loyal to Paul Heyman. For years, Taz worked on a handshake agreement. He never signed a formal contract. He worked on trust and on the gospel truth of Heyman's word. That trust held for a long time. Taz was one of the few who stayed loyal through the worst times. Then Taz decided to leave ECW. He decided to pursue an opportunity with the WWE. He gave his notice professionally. He left respectfully. He did not badmouth the company. He did not burn bridges. He just said he was ready for the next chapter of his career. But Paul Heyman took it as a betrayal of the family. His reaction was swift, vindictive. He did not let Taz leave cleanly. There was no good luck message. There was no recognition of Taz's contributions to ECW. Instead, there was sabotage. According to Taz, Heyman attempted to sabotage his reputation in the WWE locker room. Whispered to WWE officials. He told them Taz would be difficult to work with. He said Taz was a punishment to the locker room. He said Taz was a prima donna who would cause problems. He poisoned the well before Taz could even start his new job. He tried to damage Taz's reputation before Taz could even get settled. This was Heyman's pattern with people who tried to leave. They were branded as traitors. Mike Awesome was another example. Awesome left ECW because the company had stopped paying him. He went to WCW looking for actual paychecks. He was tired of broken promises. He was tired of lies. He was tired of being broke. Heyman's response was to use the ECW television platform to encourage fans to harass Awesome. He turned his audience into a weapon. He made Awesome into a villain. He told fans to boo Awesome. He told fans to disrespect him. He told fans that Awesome was a traitor and deserved to be hated. Awesome was just trying to get paid what was owed to him, but Heyman made him into the bad guy. This is what happened when you tried to leave the revolution. You got destroyed. Your reputation was attacked. You were made an example so others would think twice about leaving. The message was crystal clear. Stay with Paul and stay poor and unpaid, or leave and get your career sabotaged in public retaliation. This pattern was consistent. This was Heyman's standard operating procedure for anyone who dared to leave or challenge him. Number 9 is Eric Bischoff. Bischoff ran WCW during the most competitive era in wrestling history. He was Paul Heyman's main rival during the Monday Night Wars. He was the guy trying to compete against ECW on television. Bischoff saw Heyman from the outside. He saw how Heyman operated, saw the machinery working from the competitor's perspective. He was not emotionally invested in Heyman's vision. He was not trying to believe in the revolution. He was trying to beat Heyman in business, so he could see clearly what was actually happening. Bischoff calls Heyman a professional victim and a con artist. These are strong words from a guy who competed against Heyman directly for years. Bischoff's analysis is straightforward and damning. Heyman convinced young men to destroy their bodies for his own ego and personal vision. That is what he did. He took talented wrestlers and he told them they were part of something special. He told them they were part of a revolution. He told them that money did not matter as much as the cause. He told them to sacrifice themselves physically because it would be worth it in the end. And they believed him. Heyman's underdog narrative was a calculated branding tool. It allowed him to appear as the victim while acting as the aggressor. He played both sides perfectly. He controlled the story. His wrestlers were the ones who actually suffered. They bled, got injured. They went broke. Meanwhile, Heyman maintained a lifestyle his employees could not afford. He lived comfortably. He had money. His wrestlers were eating ramen noodles and losing their houses. Bischoff maintains that Heyman never intended to run a sustainable company. It was always a con from the beginning. It was a long-term play to stay relevant in the industry and eventually escape with his reputation intact. He benefited from the blood and sacrifice of his roster while they struggled to survive. He took their work and their sacrifice, and he converted it into his own success. Bischoff's perspective matters because he was not part of the ECW family. He was not emotionally invested in Heyman's vision of the revolution. He could see the con clearly from the outside. He was looking at it with objective eyes. What he saw was a man who prioritized his own success over the well-being of everyone who built his empire. Number 8 is Sabu. The physical toll tells the story better than anything else. The body of every wrestler who worked for Paul Heyman is a testimony to his exploitation. Sabu was an international wrestling star. He was known around the world. He had legitimacy outside of ECW. He took some of the most extreme bumps in ECW history. He did things in the ring that should have killed him. His body is a roadmap of violence and sacrifice. He bled. He broke bones. He dislocated shoulders. He took chair shots to the head. He threw himself onto thumbtacks. He pushed the limits of what is possible in a wrestling ring. He was one of the most dangerous men to ever step into an ECW ring. He did all of this for Paul Heyman's vision. He did all of this for the revolution. His compensation was promises. Payment was Heyman telling him he was great. Heyman promised Sabu the world. He promised that the revolution would be worth the pain. He promised that Sabu was a legend. Promised that the fans loved Sabu. He promised that everything would be worth it in the end. Promises were hollow. They were empty. They were lies. Sabu never received the money, never received respect. He never received what was owed to him. Sabu stated plainly and directly that Heyman promised the world and gave nothing. That is the simple truth. Heyman made promises and broke them. The extreme sacrifices Sabu made in the ring were never matched with medical care or financial compensation. Sabu's medical bills kept piling up. He did not have health insurance. EW was not providing medical coverage. He had to pay out of pocket. His body broke down from years of extreme wrestling. His back was damaged. His neck was damaged. His knees were damaged. He needed surgery. He needed treatment. He needed physical therapy. He could not afford any of it. Went into debt trying to pay for medical care. The promotion that made him famous did nothing to help him. Heyman did nothing. No insurance, no medical coverage, no payment for his medical bills. Later, years after ECW was gone, Sabu needed community-funded benefit shows just to pay for basic medical expenses. Think about what that means. An international wrestling star, a guy who wrestled in multiple countries, a guy who was known around the world. He had to rely on charity from the wrestling community to cover his medical bills. Wrestling fans had to raise money for him. Other wrestlers had to help him. That is the legacy of Heyman's revolution for someone like Sabu. That is what the revolution cost him. That is what his extreme sacrifices bought him. Number 7 is Lance Storm. Lance Storm had a high standard of professional ethics. He believed deeply in doing business the right way. He believed in honest transactions. He believed in keeping your word. He believed in professional integrity. Working for Paul Heyman was an exercise in confusion and frustration for Lance Storm. Every single day was a guessing game. What was real? What was a lie? What was another manipulation? What was actually happening? Storm could never be sure. He was constantly trying to determine what was actually happening is what was another deception from Heyman. It went beyond the normal blurring of reality and fiction in professional wrestling. In wrestling, the lines are supposed to be blurred. That is part of the entertainment. Heyman used deception as a weapon intentionally. He used it to control people. He would lie to your face about your paycheck, lie about company finances. He would lie about other wrestlers. He would lie about anything. He would lie to your face and then expect you to believe him the next day about something completely different. Storm eventually reached his breaking point. He experienced a bounce check from Heyman. That was the moment. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. He put up with so much, but a bounce check was too far. That meant his money disappeared. His trust was broken in the most concrete way possible. Told Heyman directly what would happen. If you bounce another check, I walk out. I am gone. I will not work for you anymore. Not one more day, not one more match. I am finished. That message got through to Heyman. It was clear and it was serious. Heyman started paying Storm via direct deposit after that. Direct deposit. He could not bounce a check to a bank account. Storm became one of the few wrestlers who was paid consistently and on time. But this did not fix the larger problem. Storm never respected Heyman again. The creative brilliance was undeniable. The business conduct was absolutely indefensible. Storm's perspective shows that Heyman's genius as a creative booker was inextricably linked to carny instincts that made honest business impossible. You could not separate the genius from the dishonesty. They were part of the same person. They were part of the same operation. Storm left ECW to find ethical stability in WCW and the WWE. He needed to work for people he could respect. He needed to work for people who paid their workers on time. He needed to work for people who told the truth. Lance Storm's story is important because it shows that even respect and professional boundaries could not protect you from Heyman's exploitation. You had to draw a hard line. You had to be willing to leave. That is the only thing Heyman understood. Strength, power, the willingness to walk away. Everyone else was just another toy in his sandbox to manipulate and control. Number 6 is Shane Douglas. Shane Douglas threw down the NWA Championship and declared the Extreme Era. He was an instrumental founder of ECW. He was the first to break from the old-school wrestling paradigm. He helped create the template for Extreme Wrestling. But his relationship with Paul Heyman eventually soured completely. Douglas came to view Heyman as a manipulative sociopath. These are serious accusations from someone who helped build everything. They're not light words. a sociopath. That is what Shane Douglas said. Douglas's critique focuses on what he calls Heyman's God complex. Heyman needed to control everything: narrative, the wrestlers, the emotions, the relationships. He needed to be the smartest person in the room at all times. He needed everyone to know that he was in charge. He needed everyone to understand that he made the decisions. He needed to be the center of everything. That need for control manifested in different ways. Douglas describes Heyman as someone who viewed wrestlers as toys in his sandbox. They were objects for Heyman to play with. They were playthings. When they were no longer useful, they were discarded, were thrown away. There was no regard for their humanity. There was no respect for their sacrifice. There was no consideration for who they were as people. Douglas pointed to how Heyman handled the triple threat stable. While the group was the focal point of the promotion, Heyman constantly played them against each other. He created locker room conflict on purpose. He turned allies into competitors for his favor. He told them different stories. He made them jealous of each other. He blurred the line between real life and professional angles so thoroughly, nobody could tell what was genuine. Nobody could tell what was a work. Nobody could trust the person next to them. That was the sandbox. That was how Heyman controlled people. He made them uncertain. He made them paranoid. He made them afraid. Douglas has said that Heyman's manipulative mind games actually hampered his career later. When Douglas moved to the WWE, he found himself handicapped. He was used to a booker who operated through emotional leverage and psychological games. He was used to a sandbox mentality where the booker held all the power. The WWE operated differently. It was more structured. It was more professional. It was less about manipulation and more about execution. Douglas had learned the wrong lessons from ECW. He had learned how to survive in a psychologically toxic environment, but those skills did not translate to a legitimate corporate structure. Number 5 is Rob Van Dam. RVD was the biggest star in ECW by the end. He was the most popular wrestler on the entire roster. He was the main draw. He was the guy that put people in seats. Fans paid money to see Rob Van Dam. He was the reason people cared about ECW in the final years. He was flying through the air. He was doing high spots. He was doing things nobody had ever seen before. He was innovative. He was exciting. He was the future of ECW. Despite being the most important wrestler in the company, Heyman kept RVD completely in the dark. RVD had no idea what was happening with the company. He did not know about the financial troubles. He did not know that the company was about to go bankrupt. He did not know that money was not coming in. He did not know about distributor issues. He did not know about Heyman's secret negotiations with the WWE. Heyman was working a deal with Vince McMahon. Heyman was preparing his own escape. While RVD was still wrestling, while RVD was still fighting, while RVD was still bleeding in the ECW arena, while Heyman was already planning his exit strategy, he was already securing his own future. He was already making his own deal. And he let RVD think everything was fine. He let RVD think the company would survive. He let RVD think they were going to make it through. It was all a lie. RVD's grievance is centered on complete betrayal of trust. The betrayal was total. The roster was being told to stay the course, to keep fighting, to keep bleeding. The revolution is still alive, they were told. Keep sacrificing, keep pushing. But Heyman had already surrendered. He had already made a deal with the enemy. He had already signed with the WWE. He had already secured his future. He was just letting his troops fight a war he had already decided to lose. RVD described it perfectly and painfully. They were fighting a war for a leader who had already surrendered without telling his troops. That is the most honest summary of what happened. The soldiers did not know their general had already fled. They kept fighting thinking victory was possible. They kept pushing. They kept sacrificing. But it was never possible. The general had already made a deal with the enemy. The general had already betrayed them. RVD felt the dishonesty most of all. It was not just the loss of the company. It was not just the financial hit. It was the personal betrayal. It was the fact that Heyman lied to his face every single day. RVD kept showing up. He kept working. He kept giving everything. He kept bleeding in the ring. And Heyman kept lying about the status of the company and his own situation. Number 4 is New Jack. Jerome Young, known as New Jack, was one of ECW's most shocking and loyal wrestlers. His later assessment of Heyman was brutal and direct. New Jack called Heyman a liar who used street talent for shock value while providing zero security or protection. The hardcore style that defined ECW was dangerous. It was legitimately unsafe. Wrestlers were encouraged to blade. They cut themselves to bleed for real. They took high-risk falls. Heyman promoted this dangerous style, but provided no safety net. There were no legitimate medical personnel. There was no proper vetting process for new talent. There was no professional oversight. Heyman wanted the shock. He wanted the edginess. But when something went wrong, he was nowhere to be found. The mass transit incident is the perfect example. In November 1996, a 17-year-old kid named Eric Koulis wrestled under the name Mass Transit. During his match with New Jack, Koulis was bladed too deeply. He bled excessively. The injury was severe. Koulis had lied about his age and his training to get into that match. But that does not excuse what happened. Heyman should have had a proper vetting process. Heyman should have had trained medical personnel at the event. Heyman should have had safety protocols. He should have ensured that only trained and age-appropriate wrestlers were in hardcore matches. Instead, Heyman had none of that. He had a spectacle-first mentality. He wanted the extreme moment. He wanted the edge. Safety was secondary. The incident nearly cost ECW its first pay-per-view event, barely legal. It created a massive legal and liability nightmare. It led to years of legal battles. New Jack was the one facing criminal charges. New Jack's reputation took a hit. New Jack dealt with the legal consequences and the public backlash. But Heyman capitalized on the edgy reputation the incident brought to the brand. He used the controversy to sell tickets. He used the danger to market the company. New Jack was the victim. Heyman was the beneficiary. That is what New Jack resented. He was used for the shock value. He was sacrificed when things went wrong. And Heyman escaped without facing any consequences himself. Number 3 is the Sandman. The Sandman was a loyal soldier in the ECW army. He was dedicated. He was committed. He was all in. He bought into Heyman's vision completely, believed in the revolution with all his heart, believed that what they were building mattered. Heyman gave grand speeches about family. He spoke about brotherhood and loyalty. He spoke about fighting together against the system. He spoke about revolution and rebellion. These were powerful speeches. They moved wrestlers emotionally. They made wrestlers feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. They made wrestlers feel like they were fighting for a cause. But while Heyman was giving these speeches, wrestlers' bank accounts were empty. They were broke. They were struggling. They could not pay their rent. They could not pay their bills. The Sandman has been direct about this dynamic. Heyman gave grand speeches about the family and the revolution just so you would not notice your bank account was empty. That is the core manipulation. That is the heart of Heyman's con. Create an emotional narrative so compelling that wrestlers do not focus on the financial reality. Make them feel like they are part of something bigger than money. Make them feel like asking for wages is betraying the cause. Make them feel guilty for wanting to be paid. The revolution became a tool of control. It became a weapon to keep wrestlers working while unpaid. Anyone who complained about money was accused of not believing in the vision. Anyone who asked when they would be paid was accused of not understanding the revolution. The revolution was the answer to everything. Not enough money? Revolution will provide. Starving? The revolution comes first. Your family is suffering? Revolution needs you. This is what Heyman did. He weaponized idealism. He weaponized the concept of revolution. He made his wrestlers choose between being paid and being part of the movement. He made them feel like if they asked for money, they were betraying everyone. The Sandman now characterizes Heyman as a con man who lived off the blood and sacrifice of wrestlers who genuinely believed they were part of a movement. The Sandman gave everything to the ECW revolution. He gave his body, he gave his time, he gave his loyalty, gave his heart. And what he got in return was empty speeches and an empty bank account. That is the legacy of Heyman's family concept for someone like the Sandman. The Sandman learned that the revolution was not real. It was a tool. It was a mask that Heyman wore to hide what he was actually doing behind the scenes. Number 2 is Chris Jericho. Jericho's stint in ECW was a critical stepping stone to his legendary career. He was young, he was hungry, was trying to make it. He learned important lessons about business ethics from Paul Heyman. Not good lessons, bad lessons. Lessons about how not to treat your workers. Jericho has been particularly scathing about Heyman's character as a businessman. He calls Heyman a pathological liar. This is not someone who struggles with the truth sometimes. This is a person who lies constantly, deliberately. It is habitual. It is pathological. Jericho recounts instances where Heyman would look him in the eye and lie while fully aware that Jericho knew he was lying. The lie was so obvious that Jericho knew it was a lie, but Heyman said it anyway. He did not care that Jericho knew he was lying. This erosion of trust was systematic. It was deliberate. It was intentional. Heyman would say the check is in the mail. He would say money would arrive by a certain date. He would give specific dates. He would say the money was coming. These were deliberate lies. Heyman knew he could not pay. He knew the checks were not in the mail. He knew the dates he was giving were false. He said it anyway to keep Jericho working. He said it to prevent Jericho from leaving. He said it as a control mechanism. Jericho was owed money for years by Heyman, significant money. Money that eventually came, but only after extended periods where Jericho had to keep bringing it up. This extended beyond just salary. Heyman was willing to involve Jericho in unethical practices to save money for the company. The bereavement ticket story is perfect illustration. Jericho and Lance Storm needed to fly to ECW events. They needed transportation. Bereavement tickets are discounted fares reserved for people attending funerals. They are meant for people who have lost a loved one and need emergency travel. The fares are reduced. The purpose is humanitarian. Heyman flew Jericho and Lance Storm using bereavement tickets. That meant they had to lie to airline personnel. They had to claim they were attending funerals. They had to claim they had lost family members. They had to tell the airlines that they needed to travel for a funeral. When they were actually going to wrestling events, they were actually going to perform in the ring, were actually working. Jericho and Storm were forced to be part of a fraud scheme. They were forced to lie to the airlines. Also, Heyman could save a few $100s on airfare. That is how low the ethical standards went. That is the culture Heyman created. Money comes first. Honesty is secondary. Ethics do not matter. When Jericho looks back at his time in ECW, he appreciates the learning experience and what he learned about wrestling psychology, but he does not respect someone who lies constantly, breaks promises. Jericho became a megastar in the WWE because of the legitimate skills he learned in ECW. He will always be grateful for the opportunity, but gratitude does not erase the betrayal. Gratitude does not erase the lies. Gratitude does not erase the years of unpaid wages. Number 1 is Tommy Dreamer. Tommy Dreamer was the heart and soul of ECW. More than any other wrestler, Dreamer was Heyman's right hand. He was not just talent performing in the ring. He was involved in talent relations. He was involved in creative decisions. He was involved in merchandise operations. He was the most trusted person in the entire company. He did things behind the scenes that nobody else would do. He handled problems. He fixed issues. He was Heyman's problem solver. Dreamer did more than wrestle, helped build the entire company. He sacrificed more than most. Gave everything he had emotionally and physically to the cause. He believed in the vision more than anyone else. Believed in Paul Heyman more than anyone else. The revelation that Heyman had secretly signed with the WWE in early 2001 was the breaking point. It was the moment everything shattered. Heyman was negotiating with Vince McMahon while ECW was still operating, while Dreamer was still fighting, while Dreamer was still bleeding, while Dreamer was still losing money, while Heyman was telling everyone the revolution would survive. Heyman was preparing his escape, securing his future. He was making a deal with the enemy. While his most loyal soldier was still fighting, his right hand was still working, while his best friend was still bleeding for the cause. Found out after the fact. It was not told to him. It was not explained. Discovered it. He realized he had been lied to. He realized his entire sacrifice had been mocked. He realized the man he called family had already betrayed him. He realized Heyman had abandoned him. Dreamer entered a dark place mentally, a really dark place, a dangerous place, a place where he did not know how to move forward. WrestleMania X7 in 2001, shortly after ECW folded, Dreamer revealed publicly that he had experienced severe psychological distress, openly about hitting rock bottom, described a period of deep depression. He talked about dark thoughts and feeling completely lost. This was genuine emotional crisis. This was severe clinical depression. This was a man broken to his core by the betrayal. This was the result of psychological manipulation over years of loyal service. Dreamer had given everything: his body, his time, his mind, his loyalty, his love. It was all betrayed. Dreamer has said he does not know how he survived that dark period. He has said that period of his life was the most difficult thing he ever experienced. He was in crisis. He was broken. He was lost. Dreamer was eventually pulled back from that dark place by intervention, support. Jim Ross from the WWE called him. Ross offered him a job. Ross offered him a lifeline. Ross offered him hope. That voicemail from JR made a difference. That single phone call and offer of support potentially saved his life. He did not know what would have happened without that intervention. A wrestler's life was changed by a competitor's compassion and support, not by the man he had sacrificed everything for, not by Paul Heyman, not by his best friend, not by his boss, but by Jim Ross. By someone from the other side of the business, by someone who did not owe him anything, by someone who saw him suffering and chose to help. That is the ultimate indictment. That is the ultimate statement about who Heyman is. His most loyal soldier hit rock bottom emotionally because of the betrayal. He went through severe depression and crisis because of Heyman's manipulation and lies. The man responsible was not even there to help him. It took a competitor to step in and offer support, someone else to save him. The conclusion is clear and undeniable. Paul Heyman built ECW by exploiting the loyalty and sacrifice of wrestlers who believed in his vision. He took their faith and he weaponized it against them. He used creative brilliance as cover for ethical failures. He used emotional manipulation to control people. He used the concept of family as a tool of exploitation. Built an empire on the backs of workers who thought they were part of a revolution. His impact on the industry cannot be denied. Changed wrestling. He influenced the way wrestling is done today. Changed what is possible in a wrestling ring. But neither can the cost paid by the people who worked for him be ignored. The wrestlers he called family paid a price. A real price. A heavy price. They paid in broken bodies. They paid in empty bank accounts. They paid in legal troubles. They paid in medical bills. They paid in lost homes. They paid in relationships that fell apart. They paid in mental health crises and severe depression. Paid emotional costs that lasted for years. These are facts. These are documented. These are undeniable. Some people will defend Heyman by pointing to his creative legacy. They will say great art always comes at a cost. They will say you cannot make an omelet without breaking eggs. Romanticize the struggle and the rebellion. Will point to the wrestlers he launched. They will point to the moments he created. They will point to the matches he booked. But that argument ignores the voices of the people who actually lived through it. The voices of Chris Jericho and Shane Douglas and Tommy Dreamer and New Jack and the Sandman and Sabu and Rob Van Dam and Lance Storm and Taz and Devon Dudley. These are not haters. These are not jealous rivals. These are not people with axes to grind. These are accomplished professionals and legends. These are Hall of Famers. These are legendary wrestlers. They built the product alongside Heyman. They were there. They bled. They sacrificed. And they are saying that the cost was far too high, that the manipulation was inexcusable, that the financial ruin was deliberate, that the betrayal was complete. The story of Paul Heyman is the story of how brilliance and ethics are not always connected. It is possible to be a creative genius and an ethically bankrupt businessman at the same time. It's possible to launch incredible careers, destroy lives simultaneously. It is possible to create legendary moments and inflict lasting trauma on the same people. But we can acknowledge Heyman's creative impact, condemning his ethical failures. Both things can be true at the same time. We can respect the mind that created ECW while rejecting the manipulative and exploitative practices. We can appreciate the creative vision while rejecting the exploitation. We can recognize that the art may have been brilliant while the man was cruel. We can celebrate the wrestling while mourning the human cost. We can recognize that greatness and cruelty sometimes wear the same face. The legends of wrestling have spoken. They have gone on record with their real names. They have described their experiences with brutal honesty. It is time that the wrestling world listened. It is time that the romantic legend of Paul Heyman was challenged by the documented reality of his actions. It is time that the cost was acknowledged. It is time that the wrestlers were heard. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this with other wrestling fans. The wrestlers of ECW deserve to be heard. Their stories deserve to be told. Sacrifices deserve to be remembered. Their pain deserves to be acknowledged. Thank you for listening to The Complete Truth about Paul Heyman. Thank you for hearing their stories.